the start recording button. Hey, everybody on the square. I'm Andrew Marston, and here we are with another episode of the Community Spotlight interview series that I'm doing to build community and also just as an excuse for me to be able to talk to some of you. And today we are joined by the one and only Natasha Wozniak. Am I saying that right? Wozniak?
That's correct.
And I think the natural follow up question is, are you related to Steve Wozniak? And can you get me free Apple computers?
Should I disclose? I don't know.
Oh,
No, I'm not actually related. I knew you were going to ask that.
I bet I'm sure that's the first thing. I mean, he's one of the most famous Wozniaks out there, so you
It
probably get.
depends.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the location. In the Bay Area, I could get you a table at any restaurant you want. But in New York, nobody really cares.
Well, that still has its uses. It still has its uses for
Table
sure.
for two for Wozniak, and they're like, "Oh, we're giving you the best one." It's happened to me actually.
Everybody in the restaurant turns to see uh, one of the founders of the Apple company. Um,
Yeah.
and also, where can people, right up front, where can people find your work online?
So my website is natashawozniak.com, and that's the easiest way. And I have links to everything else, my Vimeo videos and my Instagram and everything from there.
Awesome. And over this section, I'll put screen capture of some of these links, and they're also in the description of this video. I highly recommend everybody goes and checks out Natasha's work, as we'll take a look a little bit here. But before we get into a project or two, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Well, I actually trained in art as a metalsmith,
Mm,
and I did varied things like I studied sculpture in Nepal with traditional artisans. So, like, I'm doing 3D modeling now, but I started out modeling things in wax and using this very traditional casting project process to make the sculpture. And then when I moved to New York City, I got involved in the jewelry industry. So I've had a jewelry business, which I actually am finally moving out of my jewelry studio out of like 17 years I've been in there and doing a
wow.
final sale this month. It's like I'm really committing to the 3D animation. So it's time to really close that chapter.
Is that bittersweet to move out of that studio?
It is, and I was getting a little nostalgic for the days of being a joy maker, but then just like dealing with like little pieces of metal and sanding, and I was like, I'm good. I'll just do it virtually.
um, and now you're a 3D. What's your specialty or your area of focus within the 3D animation world?
I would say, based on my sculpture and jewelry experience, like doing the modeling, creating the objects, and then also, um, composing the scenes, materials, and lighting.
Hmm.
Animation is the newest part of it for me, so I feel that I'll probably take animation boot camp just to learn a lot more about timing and eases and so forth. But like creating the overall scene would be my strength.
Yeah, that's obvious. Looking at your work, some of the renders that you've come out with, like there's one of a. I'm on your site now. There's one of a diner, and at first I thought, oh, that's a pretty nice photo, and then I realized, oh no, I'm looking at 3D work here. I think I've skipped ahead because I just couldn't resist. But was that diner? Did you do that in C4D or is that?
Yeah, it's C4D,
Wow.
and I modeled everything except like the cherry pie or the cherry pie.
Mm,
So I just like let me just model this diner. I just took a photo of a diner that I thought looked, similar to what I wanted to create and just kind of like looked at all the objects in there. It's like, okay, it needs a plant, it needs this, it needs some lights hanging down and modeled all of it.
wow. Well, I want to backtrack because there's a lot of stuff you touched on that I don't want to miss. So Nepal, uh, what brought you? You spent how long did you spend in Nepal, and what brought you there? You said was it art related, or I know there was also some other work that you were doing there as well.
Yeah, I went there at first when I was 19 as a study abroad student. And here, I want to actually show. Got some pictures of. I think there's a picture of me. Here it is. This is me as a 19-year-old with. So this, I lived in this village. I primarily was in the capital doing the sculpture work, but I also visited this village, and I became very close to this family. And I spent 2 years there. One as a university exchange student, and one as a Fulbright scholar doing sculpture, and I didn't go back. I was, doing my jewelry business. Like that was very, all consuming. And in 2015, there was an earthquake there. So this little guy that's next to me, we ended up teaming up together. And at first, we were just delivering relief supplies, and then it turned into this whole like village reconstruction project. So here's some pictures that you can see, like when I put the name of the village and you can see all the pictures. Like here's some pictures you can see of, in process, um, some college students like handing bricks off and stuff, and then some pictures of the finished village. So they have a tourist program. They've been an amazing success. I haven't been able to go back in 4 years, but I'm hoping to be able to do that next year.
Mm. So, but yeah, wow, there's a lot. There's a lot there. So you have a continuing relationship with the in Nepal, and you're hoping to go back and kind of continue.
Just a visit. Yeah, we did some fundraising for COVID related things this year. But my nonprofit, my co-founder has gone on to get a different job for the government, and I'm, moving on to a different career. So it was just like a period in time where we worked together in this village and then a couple other places. But it was like such a beautiful chapter of my life, all the adventure and even all the challenges that we faced. Um, just unsurpassed by anything else.
Oh, I'm sure. At 19, what made you choose Nepal?
An article in National Geographic that I found in my mom's basement. I mean,
Sounds about right. Yeah.
and then a week later, I'm walking out of my French class, and there was a sign on the wall that said "Study in India or Nepal," and I'm like, I'm there. I mean, things sort of new things in my life tend to happen in this way. So, for example, I should explain like how did I start studying 3D animation? I've been doing some work for various companies. I can show a picture here. Like I've been doing these kind of illustrations for tech companies and stuff, and I can't show all of them because a lot of them are just internal. But they had me doing all these things that were like 3D, but I had to make it in Illustrator, and I'm trying to like do all the perspective and shading and everything to get the 3D. And one day, one of my friends just sent me this clip of some tutorial he was doing in Cinema 4D, and he's not even an animator or anything, and he's just a computer guy. And he sent me this clip, and that night I could not sleep. I was like, I have to know how to do this. And so I talked to him. I was like, what is this software? How do I learn it? So this was like last summer.
Wow.
And
So you
um,
started learning Cinema 4D last only like a year ago.
yeah,
Wow. That is impressive. Did you make these illustrations in Cinema 4D, or how were they
no,
created?
these are all Illustrator.
Uh-huh. Ah,
So,
jeez.
having to do all the like shading and the um, all of that kind of stuff. So one of the projects that I did, let me see, this one is very much influenced by all of the stuff that I did in the tech, the tech illustration with all the, you see, I I put the data on the lines like I always had to do in the illustration.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want someone to put data on a curved line in Illustrator, like I've done that so many times. But yeah, I did this project because I'm like, oh, okay, I have to draw these VR goggles and these data lines and everything. Like, let me do it finally in 3D.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I started out with Cinema 4D. I did like a one of the LinkedIn learning classes to just go over all the basics, and then I did some Hello Lux classes, specifically in like hard surface modeling, and then in Redshift materials. And thank you, School of Motion, for putting that ad in my feed for Cinema 4D Ascent because I was just like doing this all on my own. I didn't really have anybody to get feedback from or mentor or colleagues. So uh, that was just like amazing that I was able to find that at the right time.
Yeah. Could you hit play on that as well, just to
Yeah, yeah.
we can see what's going on? Did you? I assume you modeled the goggles and everything yourself. Oh, I
I
don't know
just
if you.
put it on.
Hang on. I think I'll let this play, but there's an audio overlap. So I think while it's playing with audio, I can't actually hear you.
I couldn't hear you while it was playing.
Same. Okay, well, good. Oh, and actually, can you click on the MoGraph games on the right one? On the right, this was so impressive. Jeez, I can't believe that you that you did that. That must have taken forever. It was so impressive. It's one of those amid the hundreds of MoGraph game submissions. It's one of the ones that still sticks out in my mind as just
Thank
above
you.
and
Thank you.
beyond.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Jeez.
Um, and then this one, okay, so this one is tying in. I just made this. In closing my studio, people saw this snake ring that I had made as a custom piece, and I hand hammered it, and it took like days, years ago. And I just put up these random pictures, and people were like, "What's a snake ring?" So I just love being able to do it in 3D because I could, instead of taking days and days to hammer a ring, I could make it in like a morning.
Uh,
And if somebody orders it, I can get it 3D printed. But then I thought, I need to promote this a little bit, make it like really, really cool. So I made this animation of the model.
wow. That's beautiful. Can you play it again?
Of course. Let's go back. Where is it? Oh, no, not here. Vimeo. Where's my snake ring? Here we go.
Jeez. So I'm very unfamiliar with 3D Cinema 4D. What are some of the in that snake video? What are some of the um I don't even know what questions to ask, but like how what's involved in making this?
Well, um, so for the original snake, I actually started in Illustrator, and you use a path and you make it becomes a spline in Cinema 4D. So then what you can do is you can wrap the spline in some geometry. So in
Mm,
order to make the body, and first it was laid out flat. And then as soon as I had the arrangement, I put it in what's called a bend deformer. So that just wrapped it around in the circle. And I went in and I had to like tweak things and tweak the width of the spline wrap in different places and all of that. And then when I went to animate it, um, I used what's called like animate on a spline, so or a line to spline. So like I just took that original spline and then I added some more to it on the bottom, and you can kind of like control. You're like, oh, it's all at the start of the spline, and then it's all at the end, and you just kind of keyframe. The really tricky part though is that the head is actually a separate thing, so I had to go and like adjust the angle of the head in each position because it was sort of like it was also going on it was going on the spline, but it was like going in all of these weird angles. So that was the thing that was a little bit like I just went frame by frame to like make sure the head was going in the right direction. And then
Mm.
the leaves, there's this site called Megascans, which is like tied with Unreal Engine, and it's for people who produce video games. But they have all of these assets, so it's pretty easy to get like plants and stuff like that. And I just added a little like random movement to them to make them look lively.
Mm. It turned out beautifully. And then, did you render with Redshift? That might
Yes.
even okay, because as I was asking that, I was thinking I have no idea what I'm talking about. This might not actually be the right question at all. But yeah, oh yeah, you rendered with Redshift. Cool. I
Yes.
apologize. I'm not.
So Redshift controls in this like all of the materials and lighting and the cameras. So you set that all up in Redshift
Mhm.
and it renders it through that instead. Yeah, like trying to render just with the Cinemorph 4D, we had to do an exercise like that in Ascent, and it was actually quite painful after having used Redshift. Like took 20 minutes to render one frame.
Well, this is all beyond me, to be honest. But oh yeah, Redshift, good, good, good. Um, as your jewelry shop, your studio closes, and you're going to move into 3D full time, or if you're not already, that transition into being a 3D animator as your main thing. I think there's a lot of people on the square and who take School of Motion courses. That's a similar path that they want to take. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to do what you're doing?
I mean, I haven't really like people in the industry don't know me yet. So I would say that I mean, I have built one artistic career already, and I would say that you have to have a lot of patience, and um, you have to talk to a lot of people. I mean, a general rule in marketing is that it takes 7 impressions for people to remember who you are. So just keep in mind that whoever you're talking to, they're going to need probably more than one impression of you in order to remember who you are.
Mm.
But it's also good because if you email some studio and like you never hear back from them, or the conversation goes stale, or you realize you wrote something embarrassing, or you didn't like feel like your email was very good, you can also think like, oh, it takes 7 impressions of me for them to remember me. So don't worry too much about um, like that, oh, I blew it on my first impression, or they didn't answer my first email. Yeah. I mean, people, when I was a jewelry designer, people would be like, oh, I saw your feature in that magazine. And I'd think, yeah, I sent you postcards. I was marketing to you, but you think you saw me in a magazine? Great.
I feel like that's good advice for pretty much any field that you're trying to get into. And it's also encouraging that um, you know, it doesn't always happen overnight. It probably rarely happens overnight. So actually I we jumped into the projects. I feel like there's so much more to talk about Nepal. So was there a language barrier when you were there, or were you in an area where um, that wasn't an issue? Did you have to learn another
I,
language?
I,
And
I speak Nepali fluently, so no. No,
did you have to learn that there, or did I assume?
I learned it when I went there the first time when I was 19. So the first time I went, I mean, I spoke like a 3-year-old, honestly, when I first got there.
Yeah,
Or maybe even not even as good as a 3-year-old. But
three-year-olds can talk pretty well, actually.
yeah,
you
yeah, I
know.
think I'm overestimating my skills back then. I studied Nepali for a year, and it was pretty basic, but back then there was okay, so this is like dating me, but we did not have access to the internet. We could not afford to make phone calls.
Yep.
Like that village that I was in, there was no electricity at that time, so we had to be very immersed in the environment, and that made it so much easier to learn the language.
Mm.
And I used to, when I was in the village, all people did for sort of, relaxation and entertainment was to sit and talk with each other. So they'd kind of get bored with having a conversation with my basic vocabulary. And I'd have a vocabulary list that I just kept with me at all times. And I'd like pull it out whenever they started talking. And I would just, I'd learn words and then I'd add new ones that I'd hear all the time. Um, and just like over a few weeks, really improve my skills.
That it sounds. I feel like that translates to a lot of other skills as well. Just the practical application where you have to use it, and then it sticks. Man, I'm kind of envious of your Nepal adventures. Um, so I
Come with
guess
me when I go.
my wife and I love to travel internationally, and Nepal is certainly on the list. It's a beautiful country, from what I can tell. Naturally,
Yes.
quite beautiful. Um, but well, we sort of we touched on a couple projects already. I would love to hear, love to get into the section where I talk about a low light, and then we end on a highlight from your career, if you don't mind. And the low light, it doesn't have to be something deep and dark and tragic. It can be if you want to. It could be a funny story or a mistake you made, that you feel like sharing. Is there anything that stands out as maybe a memorable low light from your career so far?
Uh, like it's, you know, there's a few, but let me think. I think so. I would say that actually having to scale back my nonprofit was like one of the was a very very difficult thing in my career. I also had the experience of going through the like the economic recession, like around what was it, like 2000? I blocked it, like 2008 or
Yeah,
something.
the housing.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
gone through a couple of like very big transitions. That was like when you're going through sort of a crisis and how to like continue doing your creative work. Like when I after I went through the economic upheaval, I was selling mostly wholesale to stores and they were just not having any business. But what it forced me to do was to dip my toe into the world of direct e-commerce sales. So I would say for anybody having a creative career, um, like some moment where you really feel like, oh wow, the whole situation has changed around me because it will happen inevitably. I mean, that situation, like I had no control over it. It had nothing to do with me or my work. It had to do with the environment I was in, and I had to say like, okay, I'm going to like learn how to do online marketing and e-commerce and like sell directly to my customers. Um, so it was very, very tough. And there was some time period between me like realizing how bad the situation was and then taking the proactive steps. Um, but I would say anytime you hit one of those dark periods, it's like, okay, what can I do that's new? What can I try that might be a little uncomfortable? Like, let me look at the overall situation of where the world is and see where I might fit in and what my new path might be.
Hmm. If there's anything that I feel like describes you from what I've heard so far in this conversation, it's adaptable and resourceful. You went to
Yes.
Nepal, learned the language, and I mean, I'm sure the cultural differences were there. And I mean, you went through just what you were describing of, well, when things aren't going your way, look around and adapt. I mean, I hope everybody here, everybody on the square can hear, watches this interview and takes that away from hearing your experience. But let's end on a highlight. What's a highlight that stands out in your career so far?
So I would say the day that is the biggest highlight was the day that I first went to the village that we were rebuilding. Um, After I hadn't been in Nepal for 16 years, and actually this village I had never been to. My co-founder chose it as a place to work. So we arrived there, and like people, had 6 months of post earthquake time, and wondering what's going to happen, to hearing the news that we were rebuilding, and then like I finally showed up in the village. It was just such a beautiful day, like meeting all the people and seeing this beautiful spot that we were going to work in, and just like the joy and celebration that we had of what we were going to undertake together. And we had not, like, we weren't in a state where, like, okay, there's, we can't get our bricks delivered, and now it's like not enough water. Like, all the huge problems that were going to come up later had not yet surfaced. So I would just say that was like a very high point of my life that
Hmm.
day.
That sounds unbelievable. It sounds amazing. Um, so just to land the plane here, one more time, where can people find your work online?
NatashaWozniak.com.
Perfect. And yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the good people of the square? Any advice or anything at all?
Well, I just want to say, like, thank you for being such friendly and welcoming people. I really feel like I and many other people thrive in community. So thank you for being so generous and gracious.
Hmm. Well, on behalf of the entire square, I haven't checked this with them, but I would just like to say thank you also for being part of that awesome community. It's one of the reasons I was looking forward to talking with you. So, on that note, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you on the square.
See you there. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.